Hello, my name is John Gabriel. I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati in Hamilton County. I'm interviewing Jim Brady today on June 28th, 2007. We are at the main library downtown. Our camera operator is Dennis Daly. Good afternoon, Mr. Brady.
Good afternoon, sir.
Thanks for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you did prior to World War II?
I was a student, athlete. I was very fortunate. I had a track scholarship to a Manhattan college in New York City. A buddy and I were at the Giants football game on a Sunday afternoon, which happened to be December 7th, 1941.
Wow.
And we noticed a public announcement was never made of anything happening. However, an extraordinary number of people were being called to the box office. And we said, well, there's something going on. We don't know what it is. My buddy was the same age I was, and the game was over. We get in the car and we turn the radio on, and that's when we heard the news. And we turned to each other and we said, you know what this means, don't you? And so that was my introduction to World War II.
Wow, wow.
And I was still in college, and of course, I tried to enlist in the Navy, but my eyesight, they just laughed at me, and I said, well, are we going to sit out the war? They said, oh no, the Army will take me, don't worry about that. So the Army was losing a lot of college guys to the Navy with the Navy V7 and V5 programs.
What are those?
Well, that led to a commission without going through a lot of stuff. They sent you to college, or you took some other courses and they commissioned you.
I see.
Which is why I tried to enlist. So the Army came around finally, I guess in desperation, and they said, we have a program that if you will enlist now, we guarantee that you will finish the school year. So I enlisted, raised my hand and said, I do. Didn't happen.
Really?
And I'll never forget, we're in the induction center, and there's 250 of us from Manhattan, and the regular Army sergeant there said, well, you guys got your first introduction to the military. They screwed you big, didn't they?
Oh, boy.
He was absolutely right. So I was put in the Air Corps, and basic training was really pretty good because it was Atlantic City.
Wow.
And our marching was down the boardwalk to the city dump, which was also the rifle range where we fired out over the ocean. And from there I was shipped to a clerical school where I got my 2 stripes. And then I was sent to Jefferson Barracks in Missouri, big old beautiful camp in peacetime. And I was placed in the office there at a very boring job. And about that time, I noticed something on the bulletin board which said Army Specialized Training Program. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
No, no.
If you sign up for it, we will send you back to college.
About what date is this?
Well, this has got to be sometime in '43.
Okay.
I have the sequence of events in my mind, but I can't put dates on them. And in order to correct that, I've written twice, and I've gotten the same answer both times. It seems that there was a huge fire in St. Louis, and my stuff was in the section that got the worst of it.
I've heard that from other veterans,
yeah.
too.
So I can't put the dates on it. And so I was sent up to Grinnell College in Iowa, a lovely little place, and run through some tests. And in their wisdom, they decided they were going to have me study Spanish. Now, frankly, I had no idea what that was going to do in the war effort. But I'm at this lovely campus, best food I had in the Army. And the guys were mostly gone, except for us, so the co-eds. Anyhow, I won't pursue that. I'm sitting in the Spanish class, and I get a call. Go down and see Captain so-and-so, and I walked in the office. He said, how would you like to study Japanese? I said, well, I'm quite happy with what's happening here. I don't think I'm really interested. And to this day, I'll never know whether he meant it or he was whatever. I said, don't I have a choice? Can't I stay here? He said, no, your two choices. You're going into the Japanese program because you fit the bill. As it turned out, you had to have a certain IQ. You had to have had 3 years of college. And my number came up. And I said, what is the alternative? And he said, 20th Armored, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. That was an extremely easy decision to make. So I'm still in the AST program as far as I'm concerned, and now I'm in Georgetown University in Washington. And that was my introduction to Japanese, and we had an interesting group of professors. We had a Maryknoll missioner, a Chinese diplomat, and 2 young Nisei. And I hadn't realized that if you were east of the Mississippi, you didn't get locked up. You were, anyhow.
I didn't know that
So
either.
they were interesting guys. And the Chinese diplomat was priceless. He had been assigned as ambassador of Japan at one point in time. And the thing I got from him, not so much the Japanese, he said at one point in time, and he was like a Buddha, he'd sit there. He said, I'd like to give you these pearls of wisdom, the 4 things for a perfect life. He said, an American home, French cuisine, a Japanese wife, and a Eurasian mistress.
Wow.
And how could you go wrong on that?
He's a very candid guy.
Yes. And typical military, all of a sudden the Army decides that ASTP is really a waste of time. So they blow the whistle, the campus gets cleaned out, and they had 2 basic programs. You could be studying a language or you could be studying engineering. The poor guys that were in engineering, infantry basic.
Oh boy.
Bang, like that. If you were in the language program, you got put in the Signal Corps. So I'm sent out to the Signal Corps in Camp Crowder, Missouri, which is not a garden spot. And now I'm learning how to climb poles and work a switchboard. I guess we're there maybe a month, maybe a little more. And there were 30 people in our class at Georgetown. 29 of them got shipped out. I'm left.
Wow.
And I went rushing down because these are my buddies, and well, they're going to go and interrogate Japanese POWs. And your name didn't pop up, so, well, this is typical military. About another 10 days goes by, and I'm still miserable, climbing poles, etc. I got orders to ship out to go to the University of California, study Japanese.
In Los Angeles?
Berkeley.
Berkeley.
Better. And I get on the train and I'm introduced to 29 other individuals. 30 seems to be the class size. Well, what are you guys? Where did you study Japanese? No, we've been studying Chinese at the University of Michigan. They just shipped out the other 29 guys. Now we're starting all over again.
Oh.
And we went back to square one. And after the first exam, I said to the guys, now I can help you all because we're repeating the first 3 months of what I did at Georgetown. But the Japanese word for it is daiichiban, big number 1. But I'm going to be big number 1 in this class. Anyway, I mean, this is unbelievable. Berkeley, San Francisco on weekends.
Yeah, sure.
And started all over again. Once again, we had a delightful faculty, and the gal that really made the most impression was the one who taught conversation. Because we had writing, grammar, conversation were the 3 elements. And this was all you did. This was total immersion. Morning, you called it quits at night. Our phys ed training was in the pool 3 times a week. So this gal had been a Grand Duchess in Russia. And come the revolution, as so many of the others, she'd gone to Siberia, and then in her case, she'd gone on over to Japan. And she had been involved in ballet as a duchess, as a patron or of great interest. And somehow she wound up in Japan teaching graceful movements to the geishas.
Wow.
And the military system for those of us in languages in Cal was just incredible. We had a fraternity house, the guys studying Urdu, Hindustani, Bengali. Each one had a fraternity house. And she volunteered to come to the fraternity house and put on a show for us. Showed up in this gorgeous gown, rice makeup,
wow.
records. I can still remember that experience. Absolutely delightful.
Wow.
Well, we were there and we finished the course, and so now we get sent east to Washington with a stop at a place called Vint Hill Farms, which at that time, well, the whole program was very hush. I couldn't tell my parents what I was doing.
Did you become fluent in Japanese through that immersion process?
Spoken, some of the guys did. They primarily had us in that so we would have an understanding and etc. But our primary emphasis was on reading. Mm-hmm. When we finished at Cal, we could read a Japanese newspaper.
I see.
So, because we were going to be into, as I started to say, the next stop was a place called Vint Hills, which was a cryptography school, where we learned how to deal with garbles and other stuff that happens in codes. And they kept testing all of us in the hopes that they would find somebody who had a flair, because that's what it takes. I mean, when they're running you through these exercises, you think you've got it, and you get maybe 3 or 4 words, say, I got this, dead end. But there are people who just, and they were priceless. Anyway, after cryptography school, I got my permanent assignment with the other guys, which was in Washington, and I was assigned to the Japanese Air Force section, where that was our focus. We had that code broken. We had a copy of the code book on our desks. The Chinese had rescued one from a downed plane somewhere in China.
Wow.
So that helped. And it was fascinating. Stuff would come along and that just was very informative. Others, like most intelligence, 95% of it is just data, details. There was a screener whose job was to assign priority, and there were 3 priorities. The lowest priority, all you translated was the address, saying like the 3rd Battalion or the 22nd Air Wing is on Saipan and this, so that they built up a table of organization for the Japanese Air Force, knowing who, where, how many planes, etc. And the next one was stuff that we would translate the whole message. Only after basket 1, which was high priority, you got that out and things like that. And we knew from reading about their problems making airplanes with wood fuselages and using, predates our present program, they were using a lot of alcohol in the food, and the pilots were complaining about the engine problems and stuff like that. And that's why, as I said earlier, that it was really fascinating, and you felt that you were making a worthwhile contribution to the war effort. But as I said, no one was shooting at your butt.
Right.
A very comforting feeling. And there were side benefits to being in Washington. For a period of time, I worked swing shift. We went 24 hours. And that was great because you could go into Washington and I would go down and sit in on committee meetings and stuff like that in Congress, or go canoeing on the Potomac.
Neat.
And so that went on until the war was ended, and one other momentous occasion, of course, is we started to hear about the atom bomb. The Japanese were beside themselves. What the hell happened?
Huh.
They had no idea. We had no idea. What are they talking about?
Wow.
So, plus two memorable celebrations. One was VE Day, which was a great weekend party, and to be honest, VJ Day party was 3 times the party
Wow.
that VE was. But just putting things in chronological sequence, a week after the Japanese surrendered, we got our orders. 30 days delay en route, report to the Presidio in Monterey, California, for further training. So now they were going to brush up on our language skills for military government, I guess. So we had 30 days to report, which is when we all reported. And where the hell have you guys been? We have a 30-day delay en route. Well, you weren't supposed to get that. You were supposed to come here for a week, get brushed up, get on a boat, and go to Japan. It's gone. And, you know, what a shame.
Right.
So we went to class. They started classes again. We went to class for about a week. And then he said, Congress passed a law saying men with, I don't remember the number, but X number of months service do not have to go overseas unless they volunteer. And I don't think any of us volunteered.
Wow.
And this is one of the things I maybe regret, knowing the language and being in that particular position, being a member of the Army of Occupation, probably a worthwhile experience.
Could have been.
Yeah. But anyway, we didn't, none of us went. And I would say about half the guys in our, because this was an intelligence group, wound up either in the State Department or CIA when they got out.
Is that what you did too?
No, I decided to go to continue my education. I had a year to go in undergrad school. And we had a great bunch of guys because, as I say, of the requirements for this thing. And with my lousy 2 stripes, I always felt put upon because what happened, we're all sitting there, and I have it. My best buddy was a tech sergeant. Somebody else had 3 stripes. Whatever they grabbed you with, that was it. We never got a promotion.
Huh.
I guess they figured we weren't going to complain.
Right.
And they were right. And we had a couple of lieutenants who'd gotten in the program very early and had direct commissions. And one of them, this is more personal than military, if I might.
Sure, absolutely.
We sat around in kibitz. Because of this spread in the ranks, we were all doing the same job, even though the pay scale was a lot different.
Right.
And he said, what are you going to do after the war? And I said, I'm going to finish undergrad school, and then I might go to law school. And he had gone to Harvard College, and he said, why don't you consider one of the Harvard graduate schools? And I said, that's a dream that I wouldn't even think about. And he said, well, you ought to think about it. Well, after the war, and I got back and I finished undergrad school, because I'd had such a marvelous time, I applied at Berkeley, UCal. And I got a letter back saying, you have been accepted. However, we think you need 1 year of remedial English. And I said to myself, these guys got to be kidding. That ended that. So then I took Ed's advice and I applied to the Harvard Business School. And lo and behold, I got in, used my GI Bill to pay for the tab.
Wow, great.
And I can only say this, going there, marvelous education, but the lifestyle that you learn associating with all these guys. Everybody in my class, without exception, had been in the military, and the average age was 26, so very special group.
Yeah, sure.
All because of the military. So there were some benefits that came out of the war. And I like to digress because I think ASTP was one of the biggest blunders the Army ever made. Those poor guys who got put into engineering wound up with maybe 6 weeks of training. And they put them in fresh divisions. And two of my closest friends, who'd been at the University of Delaware in ASTP, were killed 2 days apart in the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
I have another guy who was in ASTP, who was a golfing buddy, and he hit the beach on Okinawa, and one of these green divisions. He said the casualties were tremendous. Poorly trained guys.
I'll be done.
And I blame the ASTP program.
Remind me what the initials stand for again?
Yeah, Army Specialized Training Program.
That's what you said. Okay.
So it had definitely a downside.
You know, one of the things you read about, particularly in the Japanese sector, is an intelligence coup that allowed the Americans to intercept and shoot down General Yamamoto. Did you have any role in that? Or did you
No,
have any
that happened,
similar-
I think, before I got there, but I think that is absolutely true. And they were laying for him.
They were laying for him. That's the story I read.
And he was a tremendous loss. And Yamamoto, before the war, had said, we can't win.
Yeah.
He said, we don't have the resources. And that's, you know, they sacrificed millions of lives and they did not have the resources. I mean, and it's a shame. And, but people always ask me, wasn't it difficult? And the language itself, grammatically, I guess it's kind of like German, it's very structured. Postpositions, prepositions, accumulative endings, like, oh, she must is to do, she musta is I did. You just add.
Sure.
The hard part, and it really burned a lot of midnight oil, was learning the ideographs, the kanji, because we have nothing that relates to that. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So it was like being back in kindergarten. I made myself flashcards.
It's a good idea.
Yeah,
Sure.
which is why. And then you try to, and they all came from something. I mean, the ideograph for mountain is pretty obvious, and for man is pretty obvious. And the one for woman is also pretty obvious. So some of them were easy, but then the other kicker was the Japanese took the written language from the Chinese. The ideograph means the same thing in both languages, but it has a different word.
Oh, I see.
So the Japanese word for man is H-I-T-O, shito. But the Chinese is jin, J-I-N. But what happens, and I don't know how the hell this got into it, but when you combine it, then the Japanese use the Chinese word for man. Like the word foreigner is gaijin. So now they're not using shito, they're using jin. Which doesn't make that written business any easier.
Yeah, sure.
So
There must be thousands.
that was the
of
hard
these
part
things,
of it.
too. Well, did you come across during the time you were in Washington translating these high priority things, anything raise your eyebrows, or maybe every day you had something to raise your eyebrows up?
No, it's just the bulk of the stuff that we came up with was their problems. As I mentioned, having trouble getting this, and the pilots complaining about that, and nothing earth-shaking until the bomb.
Right, right. Could you tell when an invasion had started?
No, since we were Air Force, the guys who had infantry, the guys across the hall from us were Merchant Marine, and we weren't not supposed to talk too much, but we talked because they were right across the hall. And they had the noon position of the Japanese commercial fleet, every day. So they became sitting ducks for our subs.
Oh boy.
And the story I got from them was that we would send reconnaissance planes over so the Japs would think that they'd been spotted by a reconnaissance plane rather than think that, well, hey, those guys know more than we think they know. And so
That's clever.
that's all part of the game.
Yeah, sure. Oh,
And,
that's good.
Yeah. So that was it. And one other anecdote, I don't know whether you've heard about this guy outside of Dayton who does the flights to Washington.
Oh.
There's a guy who was in the Air Force Medical Corps, and he's now treating patients at Wright Pat Hospital. And so many of the World War II veterans, particularly the disabled, are coming through, and they don't have the means or any way to get to Washington to see the World War II memorial, which is gorgeous.
Right, I've seen it.
And so he has set up what he calls an honor flight. And he and his dad each have a plane, and they were flying up 3 guys apiece. But then the demand or desire for the flights became so great, they started to get other pilots, but then there were problems. The weather conditions had to be perfect, etc. So he finally started soliciting funds, and now he books 40 seats a crack once a month on Southwest Airlines.
Great.
And flies a group of ex-GIs or SWABIs or whatever to Washington. And I was fortunate enough to get a call maybe 6-8 months ago. And we had an orientation session, and while he's talking to us, he says, "This is going to be a real experience for you. You'll find that people are going to be very receptive." And I'm saying, you know, with this generation, I'm not sure that I really believe in. Anyhow, they gave us T-shirts to wear. It was this summer, while we're last summer walking around. And the first time it happened, I was absolutely flabbergasted. Somebody walked up and said, "Thank you for your service."
Wow.
Couldn't believe it. And it was happening all over the place. And people would come up and say, my grandfather was such and such and such and such.
Yeah.
And this guy is doing a marvelous thing. And I mean, they give you breakfast, they fly you, and it's so well organized. The wheelchair guys, when we got to Washington, the American Legion there had the little motor wheelchairs so that they could get around the monument. It was so
Great.
well organized. And 2 other guys who happened to have been in the Marines in the South Pacific and myself were sitting, and they were on each side of me on the bench waiting for the bus to the monument. And they're talking about their experiences, and one of them had 3 Purple Hearts.
Wow.
He said, "I guess I never did learn how to duck." And they were talking about their experiences in the Pacific, and then I knew the inevitable would come. And they said, "Where did you serve?"
Oh, God.
I said, "Right here." And they said, "What do you mean by right here?" I said, "Washington, D.C. "What did you do here?" And I told them. I said, I was one of the people who was taught how to break the codes, translate it from Japanese into English. And I think we supplied valuable information on what was happening and who was where and stuff like that. And they both turned to me and said, "That was great. We're glad you were doing that."
Good.
You know, it's, you figure from some guy who's really been through it, to figure a guy spending the war in D.C. is maybe less than doing his job.
Yeah.
But they were very nice, and I've had that reaction from others who were in
Terrific.
combat,
Good.
which has made me very happy.
Well,
I've talked a lot.
you have. You've said some great things. I think the tape is going to turn out to be very good and very valuable, which is the purpose of the interview.
Yeah, well, the whole thing was different, and from a selfish point of view, I certainly benefited, more so than many others probably did.
Well, yeah, it takes a lot of different services to conduct the entire war, and I think yours is just as valuable as anybody's. It sounds
Yeah.
great. Sounds
Well,
like
they
pretty
say
good.
it takes, I don't know what the number is, 8 or 9 for every guy with the gun.
Right, right. I guess if there's anything else you'd like to talk about, we're probably winding down right
No,
now.
I'll wind down with my very fortunate experience. I love 30-day delay en routes, and we had one. We're out there in Monterey, California, which is gorgeous. It was unruined at that time. The canneries were still going.
Right, right.
And we were, well, maybe a mile from town where we'd walk in. Because what happened after they canceled the classes, they didn't know what to do with it, so we had roll call every morning. And in order to support our drinking habits in Carmel and Monterey, we all got jobs. We had roll call every morning, and we went out and got jobs. Well, the war's over. And all the grunt work in camp was being done by German POWs from the Africa Corps.
Wow.
And if you talk about lucky ducks, being in Monterey, California, taken out of the desert in Tunisia, and I've often thought probably 98% of them couldn't wait to get back. But they did KP and pick up and all that stuff, you know.
God almighty.
So they were pretty lucky guys,
Sure
too.
they were. That's funny.
Anyway, I got another 30-day delay en route, and a buddy and I went down to Los Angeles because you could get on a plane for free if you were lucky.
Wow.
And every Marine, sailor, and GI on the West Coast was in LA trying to get a free ride. So he and I decided, well, we have 30 days, we'll bum. So we got out and we wound up somewhere in the desert on the California-Arizona border, and the Indians are sitting across the street, and we're not getting anywhere. So I said, come on, let's go back. So we're standing on a corner in Bakersfield, California, and this guy drives up and he said, any of you drive a 6x6? I just bought a surplus truck. I said, oh, I can drive that. So he said, hop in. He took us, put us in the truck and said, I live in Vegas, drive it to Vegas and I'll buy you dinner. So we floored it across the Mojave Desert, get to Vegas. He's up to his word. We go out to the air base in Las Vegas. Nobody there.
Huh.
So we got a ride on a B-24. And what an experience. I said to the pilot, can I get down in the bombardier's place? So nothing between me and the Grand Canyon but plastic.
Wow.
We're flying across the desert. Get bumped in a place called Peyote, Texas, in the middle of nowhere. And the pilot said, I said, what's happening? He said, well, we're mothballing a lot of planes out in the desert, and we got to pick up a bunch of pilots, and you're outranked.
Oh boy.
So I go into ops, and I said to the sergeant, Sarge, when can we get out of here? He said, soldier, it could be 3 days, it could be 3 hours. Well, fortunately, it was 3 hours, and wound up in San Antonio. From San Antonio, I got a ride to Dayton, Wright Pat, and from Wright Pat, I got a ride to Rome, New York. And in Rome, New York, we get on a plane, and you had to have a chute to ride in the GI plane. And we had picked up a glider, and we ran into this hellacious storm. And the plane is bucking like crazy, and I'm stupid enough to say, hey, this will be my chance to do a jump. Anyway, they cut the glider loose, and I figured, oh, that poor son of a gun. And we go back to Rome. And next morning, he had showed up. I don't know. And from Rome, I got a ride to Stewart Air Force Base, which is the Air Force Base at West Point.
Okay.
And I'm from Yonkers, New York, which is 30 miles down the river from West Point. And I'm out on the road, and a guy picks me up, and I said, I'm going to Yonkers. He said, I'm going right through there. So we talked about this and that, and finally, as we approached Yonkers, he said, where do you live? Took me right to the door.
Nice.
So I left Monterey, California, and had a wonderful time, free room and board at the air bases. Got home in 4 days' time. Not a nickel.
Wow. Wow.
that was the end of my military career. I thought it was
Terrific.
a very fitting ending.
What did you pursue in your civilian life?
Oh, I started out as I got a marketing, I majored in marketing at Harvard, and I started out in that field, and then I got hooked up with a couple of major building firms, and I kept kind of watching what was going on. I said, I can do that. So finally, I got up the courage, and I was able to borrow the money, and I started a construction business.
Oh,
And I wound up doing construction and land development,
terrific.
which enabled me to educate 5 kids.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Good for you. Well, thank you very much for your time. For
my
your
pleasure. I
service.
enjoyed talking about it, especially on a positive note.
Absolutely. This was a very good interview. I think it'll be appreciated by anyone who sees it.
Okay.
Terrific. Thank you
Good to
very much,
talk to you.
Mr.
Thank
Brady.
you for the opportunity.
My pleasure.